it is a wonderful area to be working in that sense. But unanimity sometimes ends up in somnolence. If everybody agrees, they tend to let it all rest. And so it must also be said that I'm pleased that the new government is obviously totally committed to make this work. So we have the best of both worlds, and it's perfectly possible too to have a civil servant come and talk to us without any fear of it being in any sense party political, because we're all on the same side here, and what he wants is you to press him to do better. He may not know that, but that is what he wants. And that is one of the roles that we all have to play. That's why I ended with the words teaching, and one of those who is going to teach us, but I hope in turn will be taught by us, is our first speaker, Alex Page.
Well, good morning. Technology-wise, I'm not quite sure where the presentation is done. Brilliant, thank you. Yes, as a civil servant, I can manage the technology now. But, well, thank you very much. Good morning. My name's Alex Page. I've been asked to talk to you today about the implementation of the Anaerobic Digestion framework, action plan, strategy, all words that you can use, but which we'll take forward after today. Firstly, let me just put into a broader macro context why we believe AD is one of the technologies which can be taken forward to help deliver some of our commitments. And I'll just outline broadly what those commitments are. Well, firstly, we have the Climate Change Act, which is suggesting and asking for a reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. We then look forward to the EU Renewable Energy Directive, again, which is looking to ensure that over 15% of our renewable energy comes from different renewable sources going through into the future. We also have the EU Landfill Directive, which asks us to reduce the amount of waste that we send to landfill. So those are our three key macro commitments, targets, goals that we as the UK have signed up to. Taking those, how have we then translated and synthesized that down into a policy context? We have the climate change objective. We're looking to reduce our carbon footprints. We have renewable energy, electricity, heat, all very important, gas. I mentioned the diverting waste away from landfill. We're looking, as suggested by Lord Devon, the difference between the food wastes and the commingled wastes. How do we continue to collect those, the green wastes? How do we manage those elements of our waste hierarchy? We have the renewable resources, the sources that we need to ensure we have a sustainable farming system, a sustainable economy going through into the future. And then something as well that's very important if we're trying to change our economy, decarbonise it, is the element of green jobs, the upskilling side of it, and how we can take those skills and sell them across Europe and to the rest of the world. So from those policy contexts, what have we done? Well, thank you very much to March's Biogas for this slide. I stole it from a presentation that they had. But you can see what AD is trying to deliver, anaerobic digestion. It's easier if you say AD, everyone seems to understand it, and I don't have to spell it so often. So we have manure management. What can that do for us? Well, it obviously helps towards our renewable energy productions. It helps improve the nutrient management that we have to have a sustainable farming system in the future. And it also helps to reduce odour, something that the civil society and general public have in their own minds. It manages sewage sludge in the utility sectors, and again, that helps to reduce odours. You can use it for nutrient management and also in renewable energy production. The biodegradable waste that we have, the food waste side of it, It meets our diversion from landfills and the other elements as well. Something that's slightly contentious at the moment is obviously the energy crop side of it. And that's a discussion that maybe we can have at some point later on in the day. How do we compare to our neighbours, our European neighbours? I would suggest that we're reasonably far behind, but are catching up in the future, or in the coming time. Now you can see obviously the Germans have a very, very big total capacity to manage anaerobic digestion. But if you compare, let's say the UK in terms of actual population numbers, France for similar number side of it, again, the French seem to be quite a way ahead of us. We're aware of this, and we're trying to put in place steps, actions, that will ensure that we have a sustainable anaerobic digestion industry in the future. I would suggest at the moment the Germans maybe don't have a sustainable model of anaerobic digestion. Where are we today in the UK? This map is from January 2011, so this year, and you'll see that the green pins are those that are currently operational within the UK, although there's elements of Northern Ireland that are not in there at the moment. The yellow are those plants that are either in planning, commissioning stages, those that are ready to go online, and the red ones are those that are currently being built. On that map we have a total of 54 plants. 31 of them occur on farm, and 23 of them occur off farm. So we're obviously slightly behind the times. What do we need to do in the UK, England particularly, to try and drive us through with a sustainable anaerobic digestion industry for the future? Well, as Lord Devon mentioned, the coalition government has given a very, very strong commitment to increasing energy from waste. Obviously, it's to meet our goals in the heat, electricity and transport fuels areas. But we suggest a good technology, not the only technology, but a good technology that could be used is anaerobic digestion. This work is led by DEFRA, myself, but we work closely with other government departments as well. DEC, Department of Energy and Climate Change, they drive the incentive scheme, so they're very important. And then we also work with Department for Transport, they have a renewable transport fuels obligation, and then the other government departments as well, Her Majesty's Treasury, for example, etc. It's one of the key structural reform priorities of DEFRA, the delivery, firstly, of the implementation that happened in November, and secondly, of a strategic action plan which should occur sometime towards the end of this May. Now, when I say it's one of the key priorities, it's actually one of the top 10 priorities of the current coalition government's programme. So it's being driven very strongly from the top. Also including everybody else that's been involved in it, and I see some faces around the room today. As I mentioned, we published back in November a fairly broad framework document which tried to set out some of the direction that we'd need to take if we were to deliver some actions, a strategy to take us forward. We're looking initially at the short to medium term, which in this instance is about 6 to 18 months of the action plan being live, but it will keep being renewed. And what we're doing is we're setting out the steps with industry, because as mentioned again, we believe that it's the industry that will help deliver the end goal that everybody's trying to achieve, but we realise that it needs to be in close collaboration with everybody. So what is it in fact we're trying to do? Back in March in 2010, the previous government issued an implementation plan for AD. Some of those conclusions and results there are still very valid. We've not ignored them completely. However, we are in a new government, a new zeitgeist, if you want, and that has a different or slightly changed agenda, the localism agenda and the big society. It's about the ground up and working with government to try and deliver. It's part of our wider discussion on energy from waste. As mentioned, it's not the only technology out there. It is a technology, and it will be published, the action plan will be published at the same time as the government's strategy on waste in general, the waste review. And that comes out at some time towards the end of May this year. This document is the first starting point. It's not the be-all and end-all. It's a beginning to try and take forward this particular industry, the anaerobic digestion industry. And we're working very, very closely with industry and also civil society and others that are interested to try and produce these sets of actions that we will publish again at the end of May. From that publication, we realised that obviously that doesn't end there for us in government or in industry, and therefore we're putting in place also an implementation or a monitoring and evaluation process as well. Each step of the way, we can have a look at those actions, the time they're supposed to be delivered, monitor, evaluate, change if necessary. So what exactly are we trying to achieve in this particular document? Well, as I mentioned, obviously it's a shared programme of work. These days it's not done by government anymore, it's done by government and you. But we are trying to produce this strong, sustainable AD industry which will survive by itself, albeit with some help, but will survive and go forward. And in the actual action plan, what are we trying to say? Well, we need to identify the actions that we believe with industry and industry believes need to be done to take the industry forward. We also, within that action plan, the strategic action plan, would like somebody to take ownership of each of those actions. Now, some of them, again, will be for government to do, some of the incentive schemes, for example. But there's also stuff for industry to do, the narrative around it, selling the industry. We'll help, and we are willing to help with that narrative, but we believe the strongest voice will come from you. Also, when does it need to be done by? I mentioned the timeline, short, medium, long. The short was in the next 6 months after the publication, so let's say by the end of 2011. Medium term will be sometime towards the summer of 2012, and in this instance the long term will be sometime in December 2012, probably with another report around March 2013 time. What does that actually look like, that action plan? What's the success that we need to embed into it? The key milestones if we're using project management speak. And then obviously, how do we measure that success? So what's not involved in the action plan? It's an England-only strategy, how we work at the moment. DEFRA only, in this instance, is managing the English side of it. Although we are completely tied into both the Welsh, Northern Irish and Scots mechanisms that they've got going on. It's not about opening old policy. By that particularly, I'm thinking of the incentive schemes discussion, which go on at the same time. But it can act as a vehicle to feed into the other government work, which is the incentive scheme. We're tied in, and DEC are our partners in this. They are the managers and owners of the incentives. So we have conversations with them, and we enable industry to have conversations with both DEC, Treasury, Department of Communities and Local Government, and obviously the Department for Transport. So at the moment it's a facilitation process and getting interested parties together. Currently, how does it look like, the discussions that are going on at the moment? Back in November, we suggested in our framework strategy that there were probably 8 key areas that we needed to try and investigate, try and understand the barriers, what the actions might be to take those barriers down, and who might be best placed to do that. So in generality, we need to understand the AD landscape, effectively putting in a baseline of what we have both in England and the UK, and also across the world at the moment. A capturing of knowledge, let's suggest. Also, we're aware that there's issues around the digestate management. Who will take the digestate after it's produced? Some of the retailers, let's suggest, and the quality assurance schemes, they're a little unsighted on what digestate can do to help them. They're also slightly unsighted on the risks associated or lack of risks associated with our digestion.